Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, August 25th, 2025. I'm Gary Starkoff. Thank you for joining us. President Trump said today that the U.S. military is ready to go into any city to crack down on crime, even if a mayor or governor does not request their assistance. His comments came at a White House event highlighting 3 executive orders, one that creates a specialized National Guard unit that could assist local law enforcement in Washington, D.C., another that ends cashless bail across the country, and a third that pushes courts to reconsider the legality of burning the American flag. The president also welcomed new South Korean President Lee Jae-myung to the White House. It's the first visit for the two leaders since they reached a trade deal last month. We'll hear from the president on all of this coming up. U.S. District Court Judge Paula Zinnes has ordered officials to keep Kilmar Abrego Garcia in the U.S. while she weighs a new legal challenge from him on the Trump administration's plan to deport him to Uganda. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is the Maryland resident and Salvadoran citizen that courts say was wrongly deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador in March. He was later returned to the U.S., and he spoke outside the Baltimore Federal Courthouse today. You'll hear part of what he said coming up. And the Democratic National Committee began their summer meeting today. Party Chair Ken Martin said in his speech this morning that he was sick of the Democrats bringing a pencil to a knife fight. He also told members that the Democrats cannot be the only party who plays by the rules. We'll hear part of his speech coming up. We begin in the Oval Office. Here's what the president had to say alongside President Lee about the trade deal with South Korea.
You know, we really sort of need each other. We love what they do. We love their product. We love their ships. We love a lot of the things that they make. And they love what we have. We're dealing with them on Alaska having to do with the oil. You need oil and we have it. So we have a big advantage in that way. We have more oil and gas and coal and energy than any other country in the world by far. No, for whatever reason, God was very good to us. He gave us the greatest. We didn't use it. We started to use wind. Wind doesn't work. They started to use solar panels that took over the land all over the Midwest, where the farmers said, what happened to my land? They'd have a 10-mile by 10-mile solar field that they couldn't farm. The most valuable farming land in the world, probably the most vibrant in the world. And they put solar plants all over the place. It's ridiculous. A big, massive black fields of solar that all comes out of China. Or plastic, all comes out of China. But we have the greatest amount of energy in the world, and we're dealing with South Korea, as you know, in Alaska, and we're going to be making a deal, a joint venture with South Korea. Japan is involved also, very strongly involved. So we have Japan and South Korea, and we're actually the closest. You know, it seems like quite far away, Alaska, but actually it's right up the little ocean, right up the little Pacific Ocean. It's actually pretty close, relatively speaking. But we have more oil and gas and coal than any other nation in the world by far, and we're going to use it. And that's the thing that South Korea, I think, most wants from us, I would think.
Now, that trade deal was reached last month. It capped tariffs on South Korean exports to the U.S. at 15%. That's lower than the 25% rate that the president had previously threatened. A peace on the Korean Peninsula was also on today's agenda. Here's President Lee.
And I would like to mention that the only remaining divided nation in the world is the Korean Peninsula. And I would like to ask for your role in establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I look forward to your meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un and construction of a Trump Tower in North Korea and playing golf at that place.
아마 기다리고 있을 것 같습니다. 기다리고 있을 것 같습니다.
So I believe he will be waiting for you.
President Lee and his interpreter speaking there. Now, following that comment, President Trump talked about his relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and their meeting back in 2019.
Would you go back to the DMZ to meet with the North Korean leader?
I loved it. Remember when I walked across the line and everyone went crazy? Especially Secret Service, I would say they were going. And I looked into those windows, you know, the windows, the glass, that you could only see if you looked direct, because there was all sorts of stuff. But I looked in and I saw more rifles pointing at me than you could. There were a lot of rifles in that building. The Secret Service was not happy. You know the buildings I'm talking about? The 2 blue buildings on each side. And I walked up the middle and I looked in the window and I saw more guns in that room than I've ever seen in my life. I looked at the other side, and it was the same thing. And yet I felt safe. I felt safe because I have a great relationship with Kim Jong-un. I hope it stays that way. I think it will. I have a very good relationship. I understand him. I spent a lot of free time with him, talking about things that we probably aren't supposed to talk about. And, I get along with him really well. I think he has a country of great potential, tremendous potential.
Is it possible you meet him this year or maybe next year?
Well, I'm meeting a lot of people. I mean, it's hard to say that, but I'd like to meet him this year.
From earlier today in the Oval Office. Now, as we mentioned this morning, the president signed more executive orders. Here's what he said about the order that bans cashless bail.
To me, this is a very, very big deal. One of the executive orders has to do with cashless bail. That was when the big crime in this country started. And I can tell you who did it, when, but I don't want to do that because others followed pretty quickly. But that was when it happened. Somebody kills somebody, they go in, don't worry about it, no cash, come back in a couple of months, we'll give you a trial. You never see the person again. And I mean, they kill people and they get out. Cashless bail. They thought it was discriminatory to make people put up money because they just killed 3 people lying on a street. Any street all over the country, cashless bail. We're ending it, but we're starting by ending it in D.C., and that we have the right to do through federalization.
The Hill.com writing today that proponents of the cash bail policy argue that it disproportionately harms low-income offenders who cannot afford to post bond, and that Washington, D.C. moved away from cash bail decades ago. Illinois has eliminated it entirely, and states like New York and New Jersey have moved away from it for certain offenses. Here's what the president had to say about his flag-burning order.
If you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. No early exits, no nothing. You get 1 year in jail. If you burn a flag, you get, and what it does is incite to riot. I hope they use that language, by the way. Did they?
Yeah, incitement.
Incite to riot. And you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. You don't get 10 years, you don't get 1 month. You get 1 year in jail, and it goes on your record. And you will see flag burning stopping immediately, just like when I signed the Statute and Monument Act. 10 years in jail if you hurt any of our beautiful monuments. Everybody left town. They were gone. Never had a problem after that. It's pretty amazing. We stopped it. But this is something that's, I don't know, in a certain way, it's equally as important. Some people would say it's more important because the people in this country don't want to see our American flag burned and spit on.
The Washington Post reporting that order asks Attorney General Pam Bondi to find a legal case that would challenge the 1989 Supreme Court ruling that found that burning the U.S. flag is protected by the First Amendment. Now, on that National Guard order, Axios reports it charges Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth with training a specialized National Guard unit dedicated to, quote, ensuring public safety in Washington, D.C. Here's what the president said.
You know, when I have some slob like Pritzker criticizing us before we even go there, I made the statement that next should be Chicago, because as you all know, Chicago is a killing field right now. And they don't acknowledge it. And they say, we don't need him. Freedom, freedom. He's a dictator. He's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense, and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, they're saying you're trying to take over the republic. These people are sick. But I'm really saying, and I say this to all of you, in a certain way, we should wait to be asked, because they have cities that are so under control, out of control. So we go in and fix it. They take the full credit for it, and they go out and say, I heard it this morning. They're saying how well they've done over the last 10-day period, that they set record lows. They don't say that we're there with very tough people, by the way. They have to pass a toughness test. Otherwise, they're not working for us. So, and we're allowed to do that now, according to the United States Supreme Court decision. Now, they have to pass a toughness test. If they're not tough, we don't want them for this job. They might be great for other jobs, but not for this job.
From the Associated Press, that some of the National Guard units patrolling streets here in D.C. have started carrying firearms. The AP quotes a Defense Department official who is not authorized to speak publicly and who said some units on certain missions would be armed, some with handguns and others with rifles. A statement from the Joint Task Force operating here in D.C. said that the military's rules say force should be used, quote, only as a last resort and solely in response to an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm. That defense official who spoke to the Associated Press said that not all troops would carry guns here in D.C., only those patrolling to establish a law enforcement presence. And from the Washington Post, over the weekend, the Pentagon has been planning for weeks to deploy military troops in Chicago. President Trump has called the city, quote, a mess and blamed what he calls, quote, grossly incompetent leadership. The Post reports the Pentagon's plans include mobilizing at least a few thousand National Guard troops as early as September. Both Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker have pushed back on the president's claims. Governor Pritzker posting on social media on Saturday, quote, the safety of the people of Illinois is always my top priority. There is no emergency that warrants the President of the United States federalizing the Illinois National Guard, deploying the National Guard from other states, or sending active duty military within our own borders. Donald Trump is attempting to manufacture a crisis, politicize Americans who serve in uniform, and continue abusing his power to distract from the pain he's causing families. We'll continue to follow the law, stand up for the sovereignty of our state, and protect Illinoisians. That's from Governor J.B. Pritzker on social media. Governor Pritzker also talked to reporters about it this afternoon.
Remember that the members of the military and the National Guard who will be asked to walk these streets are, for the most part, here unwillingly. And remember that they can be court-martialed and their lives ruined if they resist deployment. Look to the members of the faith community standing behind me today for guidance on how to mobilize. To my fellow governors across the nation who would consider pulling your National Guards from their duties at home to come into my state against the wishes of its elected representatives and its people, you would be failing your constituents and your country. Cooperation and coordination between our states is vital to the fabric of our nation, and it benefits us all. Any action undercutting that and violating the sacred sovereignty of our state to cater to the ego of a dictator will be responded to. The state of Illinois is ready to stand against this military deployment with every peaceful tool we have. We will see the Trump administration in court. We will use every lever at our disposal to protect the people of Illinois and their rights. Finally, to the Trump administration officials who are complicit in this scheme, to the public servants who have forsaken their oath to the Constitution to serve the petty whims of an arrogant little man, to any federal official who would come to Chicago and try to incite my people into violence as a pretext for something darker and more dangerous, we are watching and we are taking names. This country has survived darker periods than the one that we're going through right now, and eventually the pendulum will swing back, maybe even next year. Donald Trump has already shown himself to have little regard for the many acolytes that he has encouraged to commit crimes on his behalf. You can delay justice for a time, but history shows you cannot prevent it from finding you eventually. If you hurt my people, nothing will stop me, not time or political circumstance, from making sure that you face justice under our constitutional rule of law. As Dr. King once said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Humbly, I would add, it doesn't bend on its own. History tells us we often have to apply force needed to make sure that the arc gets where it needs to go. This is one of those times.
Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker in Chicago this afternoon. Now, more on the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. As we said, U.S. District Court Judge Paula Zinnes ordered officials earlier this afternoon to keep Mr. Abrego Garcia in the U.S. while she considers a new legal challenge from him over the Trump administration's plans to deport him to Uganda. The decision comes after Mr. Abrego Garcia was detained by ICE officials after he arrived at the Baltimore field office as part of a required check-in this morning. He spoke to the crowd gathered there.
Dios está con nosotros. Dios nunca nos dejará. Dios hace justicia a toda la injusticia que han hecho.
God is with us, and God will never leave us. God will bring justice to all of the injustice that we are suffering.
Nuestra comunidad nos respalda y al final se va a hacer justicia. El amor y la familia triunfará.
With our community by our side and with our family by our side, love will trump.
Nunca pierdan la esperanza.
Never lose hope.
Volverán a ver a su familia.
You will once again see your family too.
Independientemente de lo que pase hoy,
regardless of what happens here today,
con ICE, prométenme esto,
in my ICE checking, promise me this,
que seguirán luchando, orando, creyendo en la dignidad y la libertad, no solo para mí, para todos.
Promise me that you will continue to pray, continue to fight, resist, and love, not just for me, but for everybody. Continue to demand freedom. Thank you so much.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia and his interpreter in Baltimore this morning. Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen released a statement today saying, quote, while ICE is holding Kilmar Abrego Garcia and keeping his lawyers in the dark as to what is next for him, administration officials continue to spread lies about the facts in his case. Instead of spewing unproven allegations in the press and social media, the Trump administration needs to put up or shut up in court and allow Mr. Abrego Garcia the opportunity to defend himself. That is the right to due process that he and everyone else living in America is afforded by our Constitution, and we will keep fighting to ensure that right is honored. That from Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen. You're listening to Washington Today.
This fall, C-SPAN invites you on a powerful journey through the stories that define a nation. From the halls of our nation's most iconic libraries comes America's Book Club, a bold, original series where ideas, history, and democracy meet. Hosted by renowned author and civic leader David Rubenstein, each week features in-depth conversations with the thinkers shaping our national story. Among this season's remarkable guests, John Grisham, master storyteller of the American justice system; Justice Amy Coney Barrett, exploring the Constitution, the court, and the role of law in American life; famed chef and global relief entrepreneur Jose Andres, reimagining food; Henry Louis Gates, chronicler of race, identity, and the American experience; the books, the voices, the places that preserve our past and spark the ideas that will shape our future. America's Book Club, premiering this fall, only on C-SPAN.
Welcome back to Washington Today. From Newsweek.com, Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin revealed his frustrations with the party during its annual summer meeting in Minneapolis today.
Now look, folks, I'm sick and tired of this Democratic Party bringing a pencil to a knife fight. We cannot be the only party that plays by the rules anymore. We've got to stand up and fight. We're not going to have a hand tied behind our back anymore. Let's grow a damn spine and get in this fight, Democrats. LFG, that's right. Americans are hungry for leaders. They're hungry for candidates who are on the side of working people. They're hungry for leaders who give a damn about their circumstances, and they're hungry for a government that gives people freedom, not fascism. To every American who is hungry for that kind of government, I invite you to join us. Democrats, Republicans, Independents, I invite you to join us. Together we will fight with every fiber of our being against Trump and his power-hungry circus.
Writing about the meeting, Minnesota Public Radio said, quote, there is evidence that Martin's fight may extend well beyond the current occupant of the Oval Office. Big Democratic donors are unhappy with the direction of their own party and not writing checks. Political factions are fragmented over issues such as the Israel-Hamas war. The party's message is murky. Key segments of the Democratic base, working-class voters, and young people among them have drifted away. And there is deep frustration that the Democratic Party under Martin's leadership is not doing enough to stop the Republican president, no matter how tough his rhetoric may be. That from Minnesota Public Radio today. Another one of today's speakers, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar.
And as Ken has probably told you, we have already overperformed for all of those doubters out there in 36 of the 37 races where Democrats have been on the ballot. We have overperformed or won in those races. So I am not, I will declare this, part of the We Suck caucus, okay? I am just tired of this.
In a CNBC All-American Economics survey published earlier this month, favorability of the Democratic Party among registered voters sank to a net minus 32 percentage points. CNBC said, quote, it appeared to be the lowest rating for either party going back to at least 1996. You can see all of today's DNC session at cspan.org and the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. From the Associated Press, former Mexican cartel kingpin Ismael El Mayo Zambada pleaded guilty today to U.S. drug trafficking charges, saying he was sorry for helping flood the U.S. with cocaine, heroin, and other illicit substances, and for fueling deadly violence in Mexico. Attorney General Pam Bondi made the announcement today in New York.
We're here to announce a landmark victory for the Department of Justice, our law enforcement partners, and the United States of America. As you've heard, drug kingpin Ismael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, has confessed to a lifetime of crime in service to the Sinaloa cartel, a foreign terrorist organization. Thanks to the relentless work of our prosecutors and our federal agents, El Mayo will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He will die in a U.S. federal prison where he belongs. His guilty plea brings us one step closer to achieving our goal of elimination of the drug cartels and the transnational criminal organizations throughout this world that are flooding our country with drugs, human traffickers, and homicides. Under President Trump's leadership, the Department of Justice is on the front lines of this fight. We're standing shoulder to shoulder with all of our law enforcement partners to dismantle these narco-terrorists. And that's exactly what they are. They are narco-terrorists.
Attorney General Pam Bondi. According to the Associated Press, Ismael Zambada said in court, quote, I recognize the great harm illegal drugs have done to the people of the United States, of Mexico, and elsewhere. I take responsibility for my role in all of it, and I apologize to everyone who has suffered or been affected by my actions. He was arrested last year at the end of the Biden administration when he arrived in a private plane at a Texas airport. He said then in Mexico, and he said he was then in Mexico and taken against his will to the U.S. You can see all of Attorney General Bondi's event at cspan.org and in the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. And from KCRA.com in Sacramento, California Republican Party has asked the California Supreme Court to block the congressional redistricting measure from being on the state's ballot. That was the measure that was passed by the California legislature and signed by Governor Gavin Newsom last week. KCRA State Capitol reporter Ashley Zavala reporting today that the suit alleges the law violates the state's constitution on redistricting by combining two topics into one measure. It says the legislature should have first asked voters for the authority to draw new congressional maps, then presented those maps to voters. A group of Republican legislators talked to reporters about it today. Here's State Senator Tony Strickland.
It's authoritarian to predetermine elections in California, and that's exactly what will happen if Gavin Newsom's successful in November and they move forward. We won't have a competitive election in California in perpetuity. And when I say that in perpetuity, I also want to point out the very fact of the matter is a lot of people are saying this is temporary. Ronald Reagan once said, nothing's more permanent than a temporary program. I'll actually talk to you about the 2012. I was part of the legislature when they said the tax increases were going to be temporary and they made them permanent. The Golden Gate Bridge, the toll was supposed to be temporary until they paid it back. Once the politicians get that power, I don't believe for 1 second this would be temporary, and neither should you, and neither should the people of California. The second part of that is obviously I would like to preserve the Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission here in California. And I'm here to tell everybody that as long as I have breath in my body, I'm going to fight every step of the way this from happening. Every loophole that they do, every constitutional measure that they break, we're going to challenge them in court. The ends do not justify the means. And a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle believe that, they want to redo the election of last year. The time to do that is an election time. And if you firmly believe that your policies are the strong policies, then you'll earn the votes of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. And that's what they want to not have. And I also believe in truth in advertising. The very fact of the matter is it should upset everybody that the title and summary will start off by saying, do you want to keep the Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission? Ladies and gentlemen, that's a lie. There's no other way to put it. That's lying and misleading the voters of California, much like they did with the high-speed rail. If you remember the high-speed rail, they told everybody it would be a $33 billion project done in 2020, and it would go from Los Angeles to San Francisco. Well, what happened? It spiraled out of control, and everybody in the legislature now knows that as proposed to the people of California, that train will never be built. And I'm sick and tired of people misleading the voters in order to get an affirmative vote and fool the people of California.
California Republican State Senator Tony Strickland speaking to reporters today in Sacramento. You can see all of that event at cspan.org and the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Finally, today we announced the launch of America's Book Club. It's a new weekly series that will include conversations with leading authors, policymakers, business innovators, and cultural figures, exploring the ideas that shaped America's past, challenge the nation's present, and inspire our future. Some of the authors already set to appear: Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, John Grisham, Henry Louis Gates, and Stacy Schiff. Our host, author and civic leader David Rubenstein. He talked about why he wanted to add host of America's Book Club to his resume.
Well, reading books has always been important to me. As a young boy in Baltimore, my parents were blue-collar workers. They really couldn't afford to buy a lot of books, so they took me to the local library, and every week I could take out 12 books, and I would take out the 12 books, and I would read them that day, and I had to wait another week before I could take out another 12 books. And I always loved reading books, and it was something that inspired me to really move forward in my life by reading. And I always thought that if you read, you learn more, and you can become a better person by it. So while I can do many things better than I've done, one of the things I'm proud of what I've done is reading a lot and meeting a lot of authors, and also trying to read as many books as I can every week. I carry a lot of books with me, and I'm always trying to read 2 or 3 at the same time. One of the ways I've learned how to do this is I now have a number of programs where I interview authors. So I have to read the book to interview the author. I don't like to hear about a book from somebody else. I like to read the book myself and then interview the author. And I found these to be really intellectually inspiring kinds of events when you interview an author and they can tell you why they wrote this book and why they enjoyed this or why they enjoyed writing it that way. And so to me, it's very enjoyable. It's a good way for me to keep my brain fresh by reading books and then interviewing the authors.
There's a lot of author interview programs out there. What's going to be different about America's Book Club?
Well, we're going to interview the greatest authors in our country. That's one thing. Secondly, we're going to do it from great places like the Library of Congress, which hopefully will inspire people to want to visit these sites as well, because the libraries in our country today are very important places where people who can't afford to buy books can go and borrow books. And you can do that at many libraries around the country. Hopefully, people will also want to come to the Library of Congress, where you can't really borrow books, but you can see the greatest books that any country's ever accumulated in one place. So it's a great site, as are other great libraries that we'll be doing the show from.
What makes a good author interview?
An author who is very I'd say, introspective. An author is willing to be frank. If an author is not willing to be frank, that's not good. Sometimes authors are very good at writing books and not good about talking about their books. So I can learn pretty quickly if somebody really is a good talker as well as a good writer. Some authors are really great writers, not great talkers. Some authors are great talkers and great writers. Doris Kearns Goodwin is so enthusiastic when she talks about books, you just can't wait to read her books. The same was true of David McCullough. When you talk to David McCullough, you just couldn't wait to read the books that he's talking about. So some authors are great at that, and I hope to bring out some of that in the authors that I interview with this program.
Host David Rubenstein talking about our new program, America's Book Club. You can find out more about it at cspan.org/ABC. Now, cspan.org is where you can find all of our coverage. You can also find it on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app, which is where you can find this program as a podcast. You can also find it on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.